Every 2 weeks.
Yeah, she doesn't want to do it every 2 weeks.
I'll sit down and talk with her, and we'll figure out something.
So
there'll be something we'll add on.
Yeah.
And Patrick will not be the only one that'll be going on vacations. Since I am part of this podcast, I am now looking into going to Disneyland.
Nice.
And doing my review day by day. And I'll do review. Maybe I'll do a video or a Facebook Live where I'll post it. So keep on the lookout for that. As of right now, it has not been planned, but it is in the works, and I'm hoping to get it by the end of the year.
Awesome.
If not, it'll definitely be next year for sure.
Well, if it's next year, maybe we could link up and do something with that.
Yeah.
For our typical format, this would be the part where we talked about the movie. Let's say Fantasia or whatever. We didn't watch the movie. We wanted to more introduce ourselves in this one. So what we're going to do is just give you some of our history with Disney itself. When we started watching, what kind of movies we liked as a kid, stuff like that. So, Chris, what are your memories of Disney as a child?
Oh, God. One movie that sticks in my head, and I was thinking about this over the weekend, was Lady and the Tramp. That was the most famous one for me. Growing up, I've been to Disney World when I was like 13, and that was at the height of Epcot.
Okay.
So that was like probably late 80s, early 90s, and Epcot was the future center.
Yeah, that would be.
And this is what's coming through
late 80s
in the next decade. So that's what I remember about it. As far as Disney shows, they really came out as I got older. But for Disney movies, again, we're talking Fantasia on our next podcast, Lady and the Tramp, Little Mermaid, of course, and that started the trend shortly after. But when you talk movies with me, and I had to thank one of our EPs, Brandon Mutella, I'm going to have to say what sticks with me with some of the movies is the soundtrack to each one. Lion King, Elton John, Pocahontas, Vanessa.
Was it Vanessa Williams? No.
Vanessa Williams.
Yes, okay. So I hate to cut you off. I saw Elton John perform the Lion King song live at Madison Square Garden about the year 2000. It was phenomenal.
I hate you already.
It only took one episode, folks.
He has residency in Vegas. Ask me how many times I've seen him.
Zero?
Zip. Because why? I can never get tickets.
Oh. No, my mom is a huge Elton John fan, so we saw him live. He performed. He didn't just perform that song, obviously, but he performed many of his greats, Candle in the Wind, stuff like that.
Sure. And these are songs that are timeless, just as timeless as the movies themselves.
I agree completely. And I agree with your assessment that some of the best parts of Disney is their soundtracks. They are animated Broadway plays. They are phenomenal. But go on with if you had anything else you wanted to say about Disney.
I think really, I was also thinking about my favorite character. I'm going to have to go with the mouse that built the house. I'm going to have to go with Mickey. Only because he was the staple all throughout, what are we talking, 60 years?
Oh, he's 90 years old now.
Yeah. And he's had the longest relationship without a divorce. That is a hero in my eyes.
Yes, that's true.
And not married because there's no ring on her finger. Nope. That is a hero.
So do you think she'll ever say you should have put a ring on it?
I'll tell you right now, whoever's listening to this, whoever knows whoever, if they can do me doing the Beyonce dance, I'm in.
I'm sure there's somebody out there who
so
can do
in. I will fund a Kickstarter for it.
That's awesome.
Just for that little animation clip.
So All right, so my history with Disney, it goes back. The first time I went to Disney World, it was with my grandparents. It was 1989, and I know it was 1989 because Hollywood Studios had just opened. And back then, Disney was a much different place than it is today. For one, Epcot was still relevant. The front half of Epcot was relevant to what the future was going to look like. They had video phones and stuff like that on display, and those were still things that were like, oh, wow, this is really cool. Now, for anyone who knows Walt or knows of Walt and what he believed, Epcot wasn't supposed to be a park. Epcot was supposed to be a city. It was the experimental prototype community of tomorrow, and it was supposed to be where the workers, the cast members, lived. And he would always furnish it with the best and the newest technologies. That was the plan, the original plan. Now, when he passed away, and when he was sick, and when he passed away, you know, the higher-ups, and after Roy had gone, the higher-ups decided that they weren't going to do that because the city doesn't make money. Not for them. So they were going to build a park. But they still wanted to honor Walt's memory. And Walt had a big history in the World's Fair, namely the New York World's Fair. And so the 69 World's Fair, where he built the Carousel of Progress. He built the thing that goes above the Carousel of Progress. It actually got shut down in Disneyland, but it's still running in Disney World. For some reason, the name is eluding me at the moment. He also built the Abraham Lincoln, and he built the most famous of them all, It's a Small World. But so he built those 4 attractions for 4 different sponsors. Pepsi, UNICEF, Chevrolet was the one I can't think of the name of. And Illinois, the pavilion for Illinois was Abraham Lincoln. So they wanted to do that. So they wanted to build a constantly living World's Fair in Florida. In the beginning, it worked great. But as time went on, the technology kind of passed what was there. They didn't really keep up with it. The front half of the park kind of started to fall away with certain things not mattering as much. So they got rid of a pavilion and they put up Mission Space. They got rid of a pavilion and they put in Test Track. And then in the Lands Pavilion, they put Soarin'. And then they put, with the Living Seas, became a Nemo attraction. But, you know, it still kind of kept its look, but it not the same feel nowadays as it did back then. Either way, now they're going to be redoing the whole front of that park. They're moving out some stuff. The geodesic sphere is staying there, but you know, a lot of the rest of that front area is going to change, and the lands in the back have stayed just as relevant today as they were back then, if not more so today, with all the events they have back there, like food and wine and everything else that goes on. And it's wonderful to go there and meet people, because the people who work in that pavilion are from that country. They speak the language. You can ask them questions. You know, it's really nice to meet people from all over the world and not have to leave Florida. But anyway, I digress. So I remember that, but I remember Hollywood Studios was a lot different too. You know, yes, it was a lot different 2 years ago, but even more so in '89. They used to actually film, quote unquote, film scenes on the streets, and they filmed some. They actually did film some scenes on the streets of that, or in the back lots, and you could actually walk by and see the animators actually making movies at the time, and it was phenomenal. But and then when they didn't, they had fake people. You know, they were fake filming, and you were an extra, and you'd see how they filmed it and stuff like that. It was really cool. A lot of that is gone now. They did away with a lot of the movie ride. They did away with the great movie ride. The backlot tour was a 4.5 hour walk. I did it in '89. It went down to an hour walk, hour and a half. But now it's gone completely because that's where Galaxy's Edge and Toy Story is now. Look, I do long for some of the things of the old. I did love the old Epcot. I did love the old Hollywood Studios. And one of the sad things is they used to have the Streets of America, where it had a New York street, it was a Manhattan street, and a Brooklyn street. And they also had a San Francisco street. And me and my wife would always take certain pictures in certain parts of those areas. But a couple of years ago, they disappeared. So we've had to form new memories and new places to take photos, and that's fine. I mean, things evolve, things change. You get over it. You know, I get over it pretty quickly anyway. But besides the parks, because that has become a big part of my life in later years, when I was a kid, we didn't really have the money to go a lot. And then when I was in my teens, my mom started taking us a bunch. My dad, he couldn't go work, or he was sick, or then he passed away. But Then I skipped a bunch of years and I started going again. Now I go all the time, or every year. I shouldn't say all the time. I'm not down there weekly, but you know. But that's where me and my family vacation. We don't really do any other kind of vacations, not even close ones. And but the other thing is, like you were saying with the movies, I did love the animations. I had a younger sister, so I saw all the princess movies and I watched them. And it wasn't, you know, they were great movies. They were good movies. They were well told stories, and there was a lot of characters in there to like. Aladdin was an awesome character when I was growing up. All the Lion King characters were great. You had. Beauty and the Beast was a great story, even though, you know, now you look at it, you're like, oh, you couldn't write that today. That's horrible. It's called Stockholm
They've
Syndrome.
tried the live action. Yeah, it hasn't gone through.
Well, there's other reasons why that wasn't so good, but that's another story. That's for another podcast. You know, but...
You know, you talk about Hollywood studios. If I remember correctly, back in '89, because I think I still have the video cassette. That's right, listeners. Way back before them little silver disc things, they had big black things, and it was called video cassettes. I believe they had the Dick Tracy studio in '89. I'm not quite certain.
That may have been Universal Studios.
It might have been Universal.
I'm not sure.
Yeah. I remember we did a Dick Tracy scene. Whether or not it was Universal or not, I don't know. But... that's what I remember. When you said Hollywood Studios, I thought it might have been that. If I'm wrong, you edit it out.
Yeah.
The thing about Disney is that it's timeless. You know, I was talking to a coworker, and I mentioned that I was doing this podcast, and I mentioned we were doing Disney movies, and she had said, "Which one are you doing?" And I picked Fantasia, because I thought that was the original. But then she pointed out Snow White back in '37.
Was the first.
Yep. So I got corrected too late. I got the movie, so now we got to watch it.
No, and look, but for anyone who knows me, they'll know we're definitely doing Snow White. Snow White is my favorite princess, and there is a big story it's a short story, but it's a great story, and I will leave that for the Snow White podcast, but we will definitely be doing Snow White soon.
Oh, absolutely. You know, Disney is timeless. You can be a kid. What's the old adage? From 8 to 88, you can enjoy these films forever and a day.
Oh, yeah.
And you will always feel like a kid.
Yeah, if you can go to Disney and not feel like a kid, you're doing Disney wrong. And I get it, Disney is stressful. I understand, I'm there enough to know. But there's a way of doing it that it isn't as stressful, and if you can suspend disbelief for a minute that your knees hurt and your back's killing you, that, you know, and just take it a little bit slower than you were, and just take in everything around you, you can be a child forever there.
Well, and that's what it was built for. It was built to be a child, for the individual to be a child for a time.
Correct. And for families. Because you got to remember, too, at the time when Walt built this, there was no theme parks. Yeah. This was the first. Disneyland was the first. And the reason he built it was because he got tired of seeing these boardwalk carnivals or these traveling carnivals where they were really more geared towards adults. And there was nothing really kids to do except get in trouble. And, you know, not the best people would go to those. And there was always drunks, which is why for a very long time there was no alcohol in Disneyland or the Magic Kingdom. And I think we should go back to that. Not that I've seen any reason to justify going back to that. I haven't seen drunks stumbling around or anything like that. I like tradition, and one of the traditions was you couldn't drink in those two places. I don't need to drink in those places to have a good time. I don't think anyone needs to drink to have a good time, or you have a problem. And I've had a problem in the past, so I can readily admit that. And but you know, profits outweigh the consequences in this one, so I'm never going to get my way. It's never going backwards. But it is what it is. But that's one of the things Walt wanted. He didn't want the carnival feel. He wanted a theme park. He wanted you to feel like you were at a real castle or that you were really in Fantasyland or Adventureland. And he did it. You really feel like you're in these places if you want to. If you don't want to, you can definitely know you're in a theme park. But if you want to feel like you're there, it's easy.
It's so easy. I mean, my experiences at Disney